I'm Lex Runciman, and I teach here at Linefiel, have for quite a little while. I knew Stafford only a little. I saw him read maybe half a dozen times. He visited the workshop at the University of Montana when I was a graduate student there. Anybody who knows how graduate student workshops work knows that certain people have poems up on that particular day, and they're usually discussed and picked apart generously or ungenerously by the various members of the workshop. And then usually, at least at the way it worked at Montana, Dick Hugo would sort of pontificate at the very end. And it's exactly the way I run the workshops that I teach at Linefiel. I pontificate at the end. And so when I knew that William Stafford was going to show up at the University of Montana, I thought, all right, I'm going to have to do some wheeling and dealing with my fellow students so that I can get one of my poems on the docket for that day. And I did. You sort of, it's worth a six-pack of beer to you? Yeah, okay, it's worth a six-pack of beer. And so my poem was one of the ones that ostensibly we were going to discuss that day. As it turned out, and I should have known this, but I didn't at the time, Stafford was so remarkably non-judgmental that he refused to give comments on anybody's poem that day. He said, in his sort of very mild Kansas flat Midwestern way, I think we'll set aside the normal process for today and we'll just talk about how you write and how I write and how much it matters. And I think that Dick Hugo here will have a fair amount of things to say, and that will be, and we'll spend our 2 hours together, well and usefully. And I'm sitting there going, okay, and that's what happened. So everybody's poem that was up that day just got moved to the next day, and all my finagling was for naught. I'd seen Stafford read the first time just after I graduated from college, and he read with Richard Hugo, who I later studied with, and Robert Creeley at Oregon State University. And that was a pivotal reading for me. It sort of told me this is something that I could do. So the Stafford poem that I want to read is called Keeping a Journal. It's the first poem in Stafford's book called An Oregon Message. And it refers to, it seems to me, Stafford's lifelong habit. If you read up about Stafford or read any of his books, which are well worth your trouble, you will discover that not only did he advocate for writing every day, from all appearances he did write every day, sometimes more than one poem a day. And to hear him talk about it, it sounded easy. I don't think it ever was for him or anyone else, but I think he'd schooled himself, as any of us can if we work hard enough, to do a difficult thing, but to do it daily, and in some ways, not judgmentally. Anyway, this is called Keeping a Journal. At night, it was easy for me with my little candle to sit late recording what happened that day. Sometimes rain breathing in from the dark would begin softly across the roof and then drum wildly for attention. The candle flame would hunger after each wafting of air. My pen inscribed thin shadows that leaned forward and hurried their lines along the wall. More important than what was recorded, these evenings deepened my life. They framed every event or thought and placed it with care by the others. As time went on, that scribbled wall, even if it stayed blank, became where everything recognized itself and passed into meaning. So that's Stafford. Here's my dim and modest attempt to write in that shadow. This is called Desk, Window, Nest. In that dim, direct way birds think, a robin pair has reclaimed an old nest near to where, bathed in reading light, I sometimes sit and sometimes look out. For whole days that room stays motionless, dark, then, as today, not. Thus I see how robins this close and wary of human form must choose future or fear. If I sit quietly, fine. If I must, to what I'm reading, talk back, but do so quietly, no pacing, no gestures, that works. As now a parental bird has settled down again, not watching me, but rather the woodland it scans for danger or what might answer hunger. Now it flies down, away, so easy my envy. It pecks at something, carries it to a branch. I answer the door, return in an hour. Desk, window, nest. A sudden flaring, then in 3 up-tilted beaks, insistent throats, the small, raw beauties of desire. Let me just say a little bit more. What Stafford's work and example has taught me comes to this. We live always, every day, an hour awash in meaning. Not that this meaning may hold everything from terror to uncertainty to joy, but that it holds all of these things all the time. This sort of recognition is difficult to internalize. It offers both consolation and, if you will, desolation at the same time. The challenge becomes learning how to live in such a condition. And for Stafford, writing was essential to learning how to live. I've mimicked this evening what I remember Bill Stafford doing at readings. Wearing a tweed coat and fishing into his pocket for little typed pieces of paper. I never saw him read from books like other authors usually do. His public persona was avuncular, and sometimes he read pretty much only those poems that tended to make you feel better if you were in the audience. But in his work, there's always an undercurrent to an understanding that the stakes every day are life and death, and how we align ourselves, how we relate to each of those. Happy 100th birthday, Bill Stafford. Thanks.